Welcome back, everybody. It's RMT Aquila. I am back with Christine, and we're starting a series of videos where we actually start talking about how to message based on items in the cast or in the Yale review, the Yale Critique of the cast review.
So many words.
So many words. For the people that are new to this series, obviously I'm trans, and I was a public affairs NCO from the end of 2011 to the beginning of 2017 for the United States Army. I went on to get a degree in public relations, and I am an advocate for trans rights in the state of Georgia. Christine?
All right. So, Christine, and if we are talking about our PR/communications credentials here, so I have 20 years of experience in marketing and corporate communications in Fortune 500s and education. And I also have a degree in public relations. So I would call myself a LGBTQ advocate and ally. And this is something that's very important to me. And as a mom, it is important to me to make sure that I'm raising my child in such a way that they understand that they look beyond gender norms that are apparently innate, that you sometimes just can't go beyond, or it's just something that happens in the kindergarten classroom. But we can go into that later.
Yeah. And I think for the people out there that are not seasoned professionals or they don't have a degree and they feel strongly, I think it's important to put the basics in their hands so that they understand how to do it in a way that's most likely to have a good outcome. And when I say that, I'm talking about moving the needle, even if it's a little bit. You're not going to convince everyone. And I think last time we talked about you can't convince the true believers.
No. I think you used a great phrase on that, and I'm trying to remember what you said.
You're not the, I think you can't fact them to death.
That was it.
Yeah, you really cannot fact someone to death because this is really an emotional topic. And, you know, coming at this from the inside, having lived through the terror of my body developing along pathways that I knew were inevitable, and I couldn't stop them, and I hated them, and I hated myself because I couldn't do anything about them. And so it's emotional for me, and I'm going to do my best to not let my emotions get the better of me. I can't promise that because this shit hurts. And I know for you, being a parent, it's scary because of all the black boxes that something like this would present for you and your family.
Yeah. Well, and, you know, in between conversations, we were talking about how it's important that we are human-centered PR professionals, that not everything is just the words, it's not just the message, it's not just the medium, because at the end of the day, we're people with real emotions. People are people with real emotions, and it's okay because that's what makes us good at what we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think before we go into the tools, I think it's really important for people who want to advocate on behalf of the trans community to understand a few things. No matter how vitriolic, how disgusting an opponent is, no matter how much they spew hatred about the trans community, we must recognize them as people. I have no respect for their ideas, but I have to recognize the humanity of the person who holds them. And it's tough.
Yeah.
It's a struggle, especially with people like JKR who have made it a crusade to go after trans people for what they could do.
I can't.
Yeah, I mean, again, the idea is no respect. I have to recognize Joanne's humanity as much as it churns my stomach. And I think that's a good segue into the first tool. You must understand your audience.
Yes.
Who are you trying to talk to, and who else might be hearing those messages?
Well, I'm going to stop you right there, because right there, if we're going to just break down communications principles, it is who's your primary audience, who's the message really for, and then who's your secondary audience, who might be influenced, who might just be walking by. They're not who you really mean to be talking to, but it's okay if they are aware of or hear this, then their self-interest might change.
Right.
Yes.
And when we're thinking about who are we trying to reach, there's this vast middle ground of people who aren't necessarily against trans people or trans rights. They have lives. They have lives that occupy time, space, make demands on their energy. And we need to understand that we're making a demand on their time and energy. So we need to be respectful of that. Sitting someone down in a corner and reading them the Yale Critique is not, that's going to make enemies super fast. It's dense, it's academic, it's hard to understand.
Yes.
And it's not meant for public consumption.
It really is not. Wasn't it? It was published in the Yale Law Review, correct?
Yes.
So then its audience, the legal community, who love dry and dense and wordy and verbose.
Because they're building arguments that they're going to be making in court.
Exactly. This is a reference, not
now,
an ad or a press release.
Yeah. And when you talk to other people about this, you are also making arguments in a court, just the court of public opinion versus a court of law. So you don't really have the same kinds of evidentiary bar, pun intended.
I was wondering.
I mean, my father, God's love him, made puns all the time. But we don't have, we can, if you're having a conversation with someone, you can conceivably rely on this one document. It gives a lot of stuff. And another one of my favorites, they were talking about a focus group that they were having. And I think we mentioned this one in our first conversation. The review conducted a series of focus groups with healthcare workers of varying backgrounds, some of whom are not even clinicians. It is not clear what the expertise of these individuals might be in the field of transgender health. Of note, 34% stated their understanding of quote, gender questioning children and young people, end quote, came from the public discourse and the media. Further, 32% of respondents agreed or strongly agreed with the statement, quote, there is no such thing as a trans child, end quote. And then they dropped this wonderful bit of exposition in italics, denying the existence of transgender people of any age is an invalid professional viewpoint. The involvement of those with such extreme viewpoints is a deeply concerning move for a document that issues recommendations on clinical care. Those two sentences do a lot of heavy lifting.
Yes. So where do you want to start? Where do you want to start with that? Where do you want to start with that from let's create building blocks between communications and being an advocate and being an ally and the critique?
Let's start with the basics. What audience, if I was using this block of information, what audience would I want to talk to make an effective argument based on that? My thinking is somebody who wants to argue facts, someone who really wants to dive into the academic. Because most people, this is way more intricate than most people are going to say, because the average Joe or Jane are going to say, well, so what? I would definitely not use this one on the average Joe. What about you?
On the idea that first, there's no such thing as a trans child. Is that are we going to start there? Because
pick a spot. And,
there are so many spots, because like if you're thinking about a conversation that you might be having, and I'm thinking about mom groups, if you will.
Okay.
And I can imagine Karen, for lack of a better name, saying, well, there's no way. There's no such thing as a trans child. They just like to play dress up. That's it. So there's a place for something there. I don't know if Chardonnay Karen really cares about the percentage of people or anything, but knowing your audience, knowing that perhaps Karen is someone you can educate on, indeed, like most individuals actually do know if they are trans, if they are queer, early in life, and they spend a good portion of their childhood and maybe into adulthood denying that. Is that a fair statement, Akila?
Yeah. And I think about my own experience that we talked about in the identity panel. There's so much that you don't want to believe it's true. especially, I mean, and especially since I grew up in an era when we didn't have access to information that kids these days have. I mean, I would have loved to have been able to hop on Google so that I could develop language to talk to my parents and say, hey, I've got this going on, because they built the relationship with me that I could bring that kind of problem with gravity to their attention and be given the time of day. If a child, and I think about my time in the Army, and Colin Powell said this, and it rings so true in my head. The day your soldiers stop bringing you their problems is the day you have failed to lead them. And I know that he was a deeply flawed man, and his career had many bumps and bruises. But he knew how to lead honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And giving kids the avenue, the bridge of trust that they can bring that kind of scary thing. Because even though my parents found out that I didn't want to be a man when I was 20, and I had amazing relationships with them both, I was terrified. I couldn't even look at them when I brought it up. It's scary. And if a kid is coming up on the net, they are desperate to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not, what have you done to violate their trust like that? But I'm rabbit trailing.
I don't think you are. I think, but
I mean, this is the view from the inside that you don't always get. And this is my channel. This is an extension of my own therapy. This is a therapy project as much as anything else. And I think it needs to be said that I give a shit about this because I lived through terrifying times. I lived through not having any sort of choice. And I don't want kids to be in a position where they are looking to kill themselves because they hate the body that they're in, and there's no hope that they can escape that. We can adjust the body, especially in adolescence, where we know how to give them a body that they'll be happy in.
And I want to add, just for context, that it's not always completely jumping directly to surgery. It isn't. There are so many things on the path to help validate your child and their gender dysphoria and help them feel a sense of congruence.
Yeah. And really, if you allow a child to go through, if you allow a child to go through the puberty of their target gender, they wind up needing less surgery because their body develops long paths that their self-identity says, yes, that. And they wind up not needing uh, a lot of the, particularly body contouring
Hmm.
that needs to be done, which is major surgery. One of
Yeah.
the surgeries that I'm looking at is something called rib relocation, where they go in and they fracture the ribs um, surgically, and then you wear corsets to help give yourself that hourglass figure. How bonkers is that?
It it is bonkers. I will say that I am stuck on, there's like a biblical like Genesis, like Adam, God took a rib from Adam to make a woman joke in there
Mm-hmm.
somewhere, or reference
Mm-hmm.
that I got stuck on. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
I but the fact that that is what you have to go through, like I can't imagine that.
Yeah, and you know, I managed to score a 20 on my luck check, and I have a, a very feminine face. I have had no facial surgery. Um, Now my shoulders are a different story, and I can't really change them. I can't change my hips. I mean, I would literally have to get a hip replacement and bilateral hip replacement and bilateral knee replacements to get the walk that I want.
You know, you say all this, but I have plenty of people that I know who have very similar body types to you, and they are assigned female at birth.
Yeah, I know, right?
Truly, truly. Like same shoulders, same hips, I swear.
Yeah. I mean, I
So I
believe it
mean, bodies
because,
come in all shapes, all sizes, all.
yeah, as much as I love this voice and the baritone almost bass that it is, I this is not the voice that I want. It's the voice that I have, so I'm making the best of it. But when we talk about these things, when you're doing audience selection
Hmm.
and you move into actually messaging, give them the human component. Gives in public affairs they called it the so what.
Yeah, the
Why
whiffum.
should so what?
In corporate America, we call it the whiffum. You go first.
The so what? Why should someone care about the story that you're telling?
Yeah, the
And what's
whiffum.
the with them? What does that stand for?
What's in it for me?
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, it's the same thing. The so what, the whiffum. It's the, what's that self interest? What are you appealing to? And it's not the same for everybody. It's not like, it's not the same for every audience. And you've got to look at, like, if I was putting on my communications hat, this whole thing, and going, and I was doing a some sort of awareness campaign, and someone handed me an evidence-based critique of the cast review and went, go, then yeah, there would be a, okay, who are our audiences, what are their self-interests, what are our primary audiences, who are we trying to convince, who would be more the most sympathetic, and that you would start there, obviously, because you can't fact the true believers.
yeah.
Doesn't matter, you just have to write them off and just go,
Hmm.
we're going. And then what's the change? What is the change we are trying to affect through this awareness campaign based on an evidence-based critique of the cast
Yeah.
review?
What are you trying to do? Where are you trying to lead the person? Now,
Yeah.
I want to interject.
Okay.
When we're talking to people, please, for the love of the gods, do not try to use shame.
Oh god, no.
Shame is a coercive tactic, and it winds up making enemies where none need be made. What you drinking?
So my spouse handed this to me. My guess is that it's rye. It's probably rye. It tastes like rye. Don't know.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice. I was having some Woodford Reserve. It's a dwindling supply from a bottle that my dad gave me for being a groom's attendant in his wedding.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, mine is I'll have to look it up. It is one of my favorite ryes that we just get. It's a great value. Like it drinks really easily, and it's from the Pacific Northwest. And I
Okay,
can see the bottle, couldn't tell you the name of it, but it is just great. It's a nice dry rye. So
nice.
I want to back up a little bit farther. So we say that we're talking to people. What is the intent? What are we trying to do here, Akila? What are we trying to help people do by
Okay,
giving them a comms uh primer, if you will?
from my perspective, we want to humanize trans people, particularly trans kids.
Okay. Yep.
And the other fork of what I want to do is I want to get people to a place where they feel comfortable not standing in the way. They don't have to actively do anything. I just want them to not impede gender affirming care for trans kids.
And the ways they would impede that would be
Voting for politicians that say they want to take life saving, life affirming care from kids, because doing that puts them at extreme risk for suicide.
hmm
Now, if you like kids committing suicide, by all means. If you don't, please don't stand in the way.
I will posit that most of the people who will stand in your way or in the way of gender affirming care do not realize or recognize that the suicide risk. And I was earlier going through the cast review, did a quick because again we've talked about this. The cast review is 400 pages. Did a quick search for just the word suicide. And they spent a lot of time, by the way, just defining what suicide meant. I'm not really sure why they felt the need to do that. Maybe they had a page quota. I'm not sure. I don't know why they they went through like several blurbs defining what it meant. And it was really interesting like what it said. Um about suicide, and then I think it definitely, let's see, it's about 50 times in here, and one thing that it says is it has been suggested that hormone treatment reduces the elevated risk of death by suicide in this population, but the evidence found did not support this conclusion. Oh yeah. hmm it 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 goes on for a bit.
Probably because almost a third of people that they fucking focus group uh, didn't even believe that trans kids exist.
That is true. So, okay. There is considerable concern about the risk of death by suicide among gender diverse youth and debate about whether gender affirming treatments reduce this risk. Let's see. This section discusses what is known about suicidality and the risk of suicide in this population. And chapter 15 discusses what is known about whether gender affirming treatments reduce that risk. Then it defines what suicide means. And okay, this part I think is pretty important, and I think that this is important for really just all people. Understanding the factors that can put young gender questioning people at risk is of crucial importance to the young people themselves, their families, and the clinical staff looking after them. I can agree with that, right? Like,
Run that one by me again. I'm sorry, my ears are twitchy.
it's okay. Understanding the factors that can put young gender questioning people at risk is of crucial importance to the young people themselves, their families, and the clinical staff looking after them. So, I mean, that is true. Like, there are factors, and it's important to know them. They go on for a while, and they go about some studies and all of this stuff. But I think that they have the point I'm really hitting here is that your average person, not a person writing a review who's doing studies and doing like literature audits, essentially, may not put those things together all the time. It might not be the first thing that they're thinking about. They may not realize that in their mind, allowing their son to wear a dress and change their name. Again, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, Akila. Means that they will harm themselves. I just don't think that it even enters their mind because of that whole idea of puritanical values, of that whole idea of this lack of belief that mental health is even a factor. I think that a lot of these things are just, I don't want to use the word factors again, but I can't find a better one at this moment. Like, these are things to think about when considering who the opposing audience is.
These are tactical elements. And they're big ones. The fact that you point out, and I think rightly so, that most people don't have the understanding that withholding seemingly simple things could have such a profound impact on someone is proof that most people's gender identity, and everyone has one, whether you're like Leanna and don't have a strong connection, or like me where it was very strongly opposite of OEM equipment, for lack of a better word. I mean, how many times can you say, your natal gender, it's OEM.
No, I appreciate it.
These are OEM aftermarket. Some people get bolt-on aftermarket, but I digress. I mean, it's a heavy subject. It's fraught, and I'm making jokes because it's important to not lose yourself in the process.
Yeah.
And I think humanizing, when you're talking about this, humanizing trans people, the idea that trans people are people is apparently a very radical notion. It shouldn't be, but it is. And
break that down for people who may not have realized that this was a question. Who is questioning your personhood?
Well, I mean, people like J.K. Rowling. I will just go ahead and, she's, as Leanna calls her, she's wine mom Sauron.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And, okay, have to recognize her humanity. That So JKR is coming at this from the almost exclusive point of view that being trans is a fantasy. That people like me I'm a man pretending to be a woman so that I can attack somebody.
I've met those wine moms who are zoned in.
And honestly, let me take off my comp hat. I never wanted to be a man in the first place. I got stuck in the body of one, but it was not something I wanted. For whatever reason, roll of the dice, genetic anomaly, whatever, my identity didn't match my bits. I had no say in it. It was just what happened. And to think that I am guilty of all these crimes, both real and imagined, simply because of a random chance is really kind of insulting. And it removes all of the things that I have done, both good and bad, and reduces them down to someone else's fears.
Mm-hmm.
It erases all of my relationships, my Army service, which I am fucking proud of.
As you should be.
It removes, it steals all of the values that I absorbed from my parents, my spouse, my sibling, my friends, and all of the evil that I rejected because of those values. All of that gets erased, gets stolen by someone else's fears.
So I don't think you really took off your comms hat, because everything you just said brings it back to the so what, if you will. And
yes, and I needed to have the leeway to tell that personal story and to be able to express the anger, the frustration, and the fear.
mm-hmm.
Because let's be honest, being trans in today's society is fucking terrifying. And I needed to come out of that professional headspace to convey that. Sometimes you have to be two people having a conversation. And I think that is something that many people who are trying to do advocacy work and activism forget.
You know, it's interesting that you bring that up, because I was having a conversation with someone about doing, like, basically being the sort of person who asks for donations.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that has a name. My brain isn't working today, but you know, whatever that's called. We'll just say they're the giving, whatever. They seek donations. And really, what gets people is just having that conversation. It's just being two people just talking. Is
Mhm.
being real, is being authentic. And you and I both know authenticity is better communications. It's better PR.
Yeah, and I think it needs to be said that there is a difference between being authentic, being truly authentic, and being authentic as it's used in a lot of wine circles.
Okay.
If you're really censoring yourself, like when I was just talking about my experience,
Mhm.
I wanted to use all of the expletives, and you saw me stumble and pause, and I think you could see the pain
Mhm.
of trying to find, how do I express this? And one of the things, you're not going to convince somebody on Twitter. That isn't, and I do want to bring attention to knowing where to have these conversations.
Oh, that's a
You
good
are
point.
not, you are not going to convince some wine mob on fucking Twitter or Instagram that trans people are people. You're just not.
But does that mean you're not gonna you can't use your social medias for advocacy?
No. You put it out there, but you have to understand, again, going back to earlier, you have to know who you're trying to reach, why, and how are you doing it. Uh, using shame. Again, you're going to make enemies. You're going to start a fight, and nobody nobody moves the needle by flinging poop on Twitter.
No.
And I will absolutely dead name the fuck out of that website, because fuck Elon Musk.
It's okay. It's been what, a year now, and all major news is like X, formerly Twitter. So
Yeah.
if the AP doesn't like acknowledge,
AP style. I love those guys. But knowing where to have these conversations when you're talking to somebody in, a lunch circle, or you're at a party and it comes up, and this shit does,
it does.
don't be afraid to engage. Ask ask questions, because you need to understand how and why someone thinks a certain way. That 32% of respondents who didn't believe that
Trans children existed.
trans children exist. Well, the first thing I thought was, why? Why do you not believe that this is a thing?
Well, Akila, it's because God created men and women, and if he meant for trans people to exist, he would have just made you a woman. You know what I'm doing here. So
Yes, yes, yes. And still having that visceral reaction. And my response to that is, okay, if you say that your God is omnipotent, that means they can do anything that they want. Why could he have not made me trans? He would have known, since he's also omniscient,
yes.
he would have known what could happen. And yet he set me on this path regardless. So what's my job? My job is to navigate the path as best I know how. And at this point in life, or we'll look back at age 45, I was at an inflection point. It was either destroy God's creation, i.e., me, or take the hormones. Which is a greater insult to God? I believe that thou shalt not bear false witness is one of the 10 Commandments.
It sounds right. I'd have to look it up.
Well, we have the internet at our fingertips.
True.
Let's see. 10 Commandments in order. Thank you very much.
Order matters.
So, you shall have no other gods before me. Violated. You shall not make idols. Violated. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Violated on a ring.
Definitely.
Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Violated. Honor your mother and your father. Check. You shall not murder. That's iffy. You shall not commit adultery. Well, I mean, I got divorced, so we'll just call that one violated. You shall not steal. Okay. Number 9. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Now, does that include myself? Am I my own neighbor?
Oh, that sounds very metaphysical.
But, let's just take it as you shall not bear false witness. If I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I am not mentally a man, then in order to maintain the 9th commandment, I need to change things to align with the reality that I know myself to be. Now, and I know some people say, well, you'll never be a real woman. Well, you know what? That's true. And I don't care.
It's not really all it's cracked up to be. Can I just go ahead and say that?
Oh, I knew that going in.
Well, yeah. And how dare they? How dare they say that? And because the people who are saying that are mothers. Mothers.
That will make so much more sense in the next video.
What do they call that? No. There's a film term for that, and I have also lost that. But
foreshadowing.
Look, we're gonna use that. I was thinking more of a technical artifact of inaccuracy. But anyway,
anachronism, I think. Something out of time.
Anachronism is more like you have a car and it's the 17th century. Like, that's an anachronism. I feel like there's like, we'll come back to that. Where were we? We were talking about mothers. The people who say that you're never going to know what it's like to be a quote unquote real woman. Like, that is just that. Like, yeah. What? Why? Why does it matter? Why are we gatekeeping this? It's not great.
Actually, it is.
I mean, okay. Let me contextualize what I said.
Okay.
I 100% support, like, I prefer being a woman over not being a woman and everything that comes with it. However, I will also say that there are aspects of it that being a male would be better. Just from a society standpoint, I would be paid better. I would not have to I wouldn't have to like come up with a whole like argument for why I should be listened to. I would just be listened to.
That was one of the first lessons when I started transitioning.
I want to hear more about this.
Okay, so I was on a photography forum on a social media site, which we won't go into on this channel because I'm pretty sure I would get demonetized. Anyhow, prior to transition, when my profile said, X, like 40-something-year-old male, blah, 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 when I would chime in on forums, people would give me the, the fact that, yes, I've been a photographer for more than 10 years. And it's like, okay, you got some good points. As soon as I changed my pronouns to she, her, I weighed in, and it was like a week between. Same profile picture, all of that. Changed my pronouns. And somebody replied to me, it's like, well, what do you know? I'm like, I've been a photographer for 15 years, career highlight of, I don't know, the Super Bowl. Maybe you've heard of it. It's kind of a big deal. And they didn't believe me. They wanted proof. So I sent them to the DVID's website, the Defense Video Imagery Distribution Service.
Thank you. I needed that acronym spelled out.
So dividshub.net. Here's my profile. This is my professional body of work. And you'll note 2014, February 2nd, the Super Bowl. Shut the fuck up.
Right?
But I digress. I mean, okay, there are definitive downsides to living in society as a woman. The biggest benefit, at least for me, I don't want to kill myself. I mean,
Yeah,
maybe
that's a big one.
Yeah, it's like that's kind of a thing.
Yes.
And when you have a child who doesn't have decades upon decades of learning to pick themselves up when they fall down, being in the wrong body can be soul crushing. And I know because I've lived it.
No one can deny you that.
And when we talk about these things, that's the why. They're, even if they don't kill themselves, even if what the cast review has said is that the data is indeterminate, doesn't matter. There are scared kids who need help, who are asking for help.
Yes.
And I know that I have said acknowledge the humanity, and I know that I have said do not, shame people. But what kind of a sadistic bastard or bitch, take your pick, what kind of a sadistic person says to a child that has come to them acknowledging their own fear and saying, I need this help. And you say, no, I don't think you need it.
Can we go ahead and say that I've always seen gender affirming care in the same way that I see reproductive rights? For me, it's to say don't tell people what they're allowed to do with their bodies. And even so, okay, so we're gonna take a step back. Children.
All right, hit me.
So there is a fuzzy period, the place there with children. I will acknowledge that it's fuzzy with children because they are, speaking from experience as a parent, they don't know what they want. My child doesn't know if they like macaroni and cheese today or tomorrow. So, like I don't know if I would trust them with a big decision right now.
Okay.
But however, I would be supportive of them and make all the little steps. I wouldn't wait, I wouldn't deny them. However, it would be okay, let's talk about this. Let's have a dialogue. Let's do all that. So as my child's parent, I am not telling them what they can and cannot do with their body. Exactly. I don't know. I'm actually having a lot of like putting myself in the shoes of someone right now. And I, it feels like I'm saying not at all the right things or the things that.
It's okay to not know the right thing to say. And I think the people out there in YouTube land need to understand that when you're having this conversation with another adult, the stakes are relatively low. You can make mistakes. It's okay. Now, if you're in the position of someone who has a trans child, this is a big thing. And I think we need to acknowledge that having a trans child is, and we've rabbit trailed way away from the original intent of the video. And I'll still go there because this is important. So, what do you do if your child comes out and says, "Mom, Dad, I don't want to be this gender or that gender anymore. I'm not that." Okay, so number one, take a deep breath.
Yeah.
Your child is, and for lack of a better term, your child is a blessing. I understand completely that, especially when they're toddlers or teenagers, that notion can be stretched to its breaking limit.
Very
but
true.
I digress. If they say that they are not the gender that they are, ask yourself, does this make them not my child? Does this make them not a blessing in my life? And there are some people who will answer those two with no.
What's crazy to me is that those aren't even the first two things. Like as I was running the thought and experiment in my head of my child coming to me with that, and keep in mind, my child is 8, so like it's hard to imagine, but it isn't. It's like it really is they can't decide what they like today. So do I believe, but I also believe if they're going to come to me and ask me this, I owe it to them to listen. I owe it to them to be supportive, and I owe it to them to see what's next and have that dialogue. But it never occurred to me that they were no longer my child.
Yeah. And unfortunately, there are those people. But the reason why I lead the, the viewer or the listener to those questions is to put everything in perspective. They are still your child. You have a responsibility as a parent to teach them, to parent them, to lead them through the process of making big decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think back, I had a very atypical childhood. My parents were super odd, and I love them for it. And one of the things that my father, in particular, raised both me and my brother with is you were an adult when you could, given the same information, walk him through his own logic and what conclusion that he would come to, and then walk him through your logic and what conclusion. And if the two conclusions were different, he would still respect it if you could do that. That was the bar. And and that's the sort of lens that I see this through. If you're presented with this scenario, understand you're going to be terrified because it's a big, big, big change. Your little girl will no longer be your little girl, and your little boy will no longer be your little boy. That is something that you and your partner or spouse deal with offline, not with the child.
Right.
They don't need your fears in addition to their own. So, all right, acknowledge the situation. If you say, I still love you, that's something you say to a child that has done something wrong. So instead, I might say, that's a big change. Thank you for trusting me with that. Can we walk this path together? Will you let me help you? Let the child take point. You are their trusted advisor. And you can say that. Say, hey, this is a big decision. This is going to be a hard road. I want to be there with you. I want to be your advisor so that you make the best decisions for you. What does that do? What's the communications aspect? You're pivoting and saying, this is something that you get to decide. Mm-hmm. It's your body. It's your life. Mm-hmm. I want to help you. I want to be there for you to help so that you can be the best person that you can be for you. And that at least opens the line of dialogue. As they get older and you get further down the process, have heart-to-heart conversations. It's like, hey, I'm trying to do the best I know how. I don't know everything. And it is important to acknowledge that. Yeah, that's the end of the thought. It's important to acknowledge that you cannot know everything.
Yeah.
If you don't, they're going to expect you to have all the answers. And that is a recipe for disaster.
They've got to learn to be their own people. And that
Yes. And this is something that is life-changing. It's going to be expensive. It's going to be an arduous task. The benefit of doing it in adolescence is they get to be awkward once.
Yeah.
Now, there's a tiny, tiny, tiny chance that they might go back. I have yet to meet someone who detransitioned that didn't appreciate their own journey of self-discovery. The one exception to that was Chris Beck. And I don't know if you're familiar with him.
No.
Former Navy SEAL, had a fantastically abusive childhood, became a Navy SEAL, was really good at it, from what I understand, retired, transitioned. He was having PTSD, and he went to a VA caregiver, and I don't have all of the exact details, but he went to the therapist, revealed that he had used cross-dressing as a coping mechanism, and they proposed transition. Went through hormone therapy, breast augmentation, hair removal, this, that, and the other. They literally induced gender dysphoria. And he wound up detransitioning. And he was mad about it. And he was right to be mad.
Well, because it sounds like, from what I can understand, and you can please tell me more about this, he was cross-dressing. That does not mean that he identified as female.
And Chris Beck sat down with a guy on YouTube who tends to lean very conservative, but he did a great interview of the guy. It's literally like somewhere between 4 and 6 hours. It is a monster video. And I was listening to it, and I got about maybe hour and a half in. And I kept getting pulled back mentally to this one position where he was talking about he wanted to be his sister. He just wanted to be someone else, not himself. And the difference between that thought process and mine is I still wanted to be me, just not male me. I wanted to be female me. And that was a very distinct desire. Cis kids don't go to bed and pray that they wake up the other gender. But I see that we've gone way long. I do want to bring this particular video in for a landing. I know that we will have many more because this is important to talk about and important to put tools in people's hands.
Yeah.
There is, bottom line, the takeaway from today's video, at least for me, and I'll yield the floor to you, Christine, because I want your final thought. I want you to take us in for the landing. Know who you're talking about. or not, know who you're talking to.
Yes.
Know why you're talking to them. What's in it for them?
Yes.
What's in it for you? Acknowledge their humanity. Please. Respect and listening to understand go a tremendous amount of time. And you'll know, if you do that, you'll know that if you're dealing with a true believer.
Mm-hmm.
And know and understand where you're having the conversation. You're not going to fact somebody to death on Twitter. If you took away that from this video, thank you for the gift of your time. Christine,
That
the
was
floor is yours.
Summation, Akila. Like I could just see like here's your 5 key takeaways. Like if you don't put that in the description for this episode, but it's hard. This is difficult. All the conversations that you have, if you're at Target, if you're at your pediatrician's office, if you are at your wine tasting circle, whatever. This isn't easy. It's not meant to be, but it's important for you to, I want to say be strong, but I don't know if that's quite right, but I think it is. It's, if you believe that trans people are people, you have a responsibility to do the hard thing and say the hard thing. And you don't have to get into a whole whatever. It could be as subtle as using the correct pronouns of someone, just subtly, just continuing to just say that. And it's the small things. That's my big takeaway. So it's hard, but it's the small things.
Yeah. No, I wholeheartedly agree. And that's the human core of all of this. Christine, thank you so much for the gift of your time. And you, the viewer, thank you for the gift of yours. I know we've gone off topic. I hope you've been entertained. I hope you felt something. I hope you learned something. And I look forward to continuing this dialogue. If you have specific questions, please drop them in the comments section. Think about giving this video a like, a subscription. It would greatly help. And I will see you in the next one. In the meantime, be safe, be well, take charge.